after he had greatly humbled himself. The lesson learned at this time was nevertheless extremely valuable. Henceforth, Joseph knew from experience that it is better to obey God than man. In the first verse of that revelation in section 2 is important and interesting. The works and the designs and the purposes of God cannot be frustrated, neither can they come to naught, for God doth not walk in crooked paths. Neither doth he turn to the right hand nor to the left, neither doth he vary from that which he hath said. Therefore his paths are straight, and his course is one eternal round. Remember that it is not the work of God that is frustrated, but the work of men. For although a man may have many revelations and have power to do many mighty works, yet if he boast in his own strength and sets at naught the counsels of God, and follows after the dictates of his own will and carnal desires, he must fall and incur the vengeance of a just God upon him. And I think it's interesting to point out two things that have always struck me about this interaction. The first is that in April of 1828, I believe Joseph was 23. And I think sometimes it helps to give context to understand exactly how old a young man we're talking about that's having these interactions. And secondly, that God obviously has in mind and sees the whole picture of our lives and time, such that when he called Joseph and had him begin translating the plates that would become the Book of Mormon, he had him translate that first 116 pages for this lesson, for this interaction in Joseph's life. As he pointed out, as the Lord pointed out in the Revelation, that it's not his work that's frustrated, it's ours. And I've always found it interesting to think about that process in the sense that the Lord gave him that first set of plates to translate, knowing that he would go outside of his instructions, that Martin would share that with others, and that there would come this time when Joseph would get to learn what it means to actually follow the Lord and his counsels. And he already had the other plates of Nephi that described all of that same story in greater detail, and actually included the parts that he wanted in the Book of Mormon that he would be able to start on after that. Any thoughts or comments on that? If you continue on in the third verse, it gives that chastisement that Joseph receives. Behold, you have been entrusted with these things, but how strict were your commandments? And remember also the promises which were made to you if you did not transgress them. And behold, how oft you have transgressed the commandments and laws of God, and have gone on in the persuasions of men. For behold, you should not have feared man more than God. Although men set at naught the counsels of God and despised his words, yet you should have been faithful. And he would have extended his arm and supported you against all the fiery darts of the adversary. And he would have been with you in every time of trouble. Behold, thou art Joseph, and thou wast chosen to do the work of the Lord, but because of transgression, if thou art not aware, thou wilt fall. But remember, God is merciful. Therefore repent of that which thou hast done, which is contrary to the commandment which I gave you, and thou art still chosen, and art again called to the work. Except thou doest this, thou shalt be delivered up, and become as other men, and have no more gift. And how often do we fall into that same path of following in the persuasion of men rather than listening to what the Lord has told and is telling us he desires in our lives? Sister Connie.
I don't know, so I'm going to ask. When Joseph was reprimanded and told those things, was that during the period of time when he still did not have the Urim and Thummim or the plates?
This was the beginning of that time.
Okay, so he did that. They had been taken from him at that point when he was told those things.
Yes, I believe so.
Because I've heard that some of the revelations came through the Urim and Thummim, and I'm just curious about that, if anybody else has a comment on that.
Yes, some did, and then as I was reading through, I'd have to go back in the Blue Church history books to find exactly when. What I can tell you is Section 2 is the beginning of this discretion that required Joseph to give up the Urim and Thummim and the use of those. Section 3, what we're just going to get into, acknowledges that, but it acknowledges that it has already happened. Now behold, I say unto you that because you delivered up those writings which you had power unto you to translate by means of the Urim and Thummim into the hands of a wicked man, you have lost them and lost your gift. At the same time, and your mind became darkened. Nevertheless, it is now restored unto you again. Therefore, see that you are faithful and continue on unto the finishing of the remainder of the work of translation as you have begun. This is in August. So between July 1828 and August of 1828, we've went through that process of he gives up the Urim and Thummim, and it is now restored, and he's to continue on the work of translation. And yes, he did receive some of them through the Urim and Thummim. Yeah. Two through 15.
Urim and Thummim. I don't know where that note, I don't know how I got it, but it says 2 through 15.
Mm-hmm. She says she has
15.
Yeah. A note in her scriptures that's 2 through 15. I don't know the particular reason, but I would tell you there's a reason why we've got 2, 3, 5, and 15 down as the sections that we're studying today, because those are all dealing with this same question and experience that Joseph had in relation to the translation of the Book of Mormon. So section 15 continues on with that same thought. And the Lord actually went on to give more guidance in section 3 as to how he was to do this, and described as well the plan that wicked men had to use those 116 pages to trap him. The Lord says, "Do not run faster or labor more than you have strength and means provided to enable you to translate. But be diligent unto the end. Pray always that you may come off conqueror, yea, that you may conquer Satan, that you may escape the hands of the servants of Satan that do uphold his work. Behold, they have sought to destroy you. Even the man in whom you have trusted has sought to destroy you." And it continues on to explain the method by which they were going to attack Joseph and the work of the translation, specifically in short, that they were going to take those 116 pages, they were going to change them in some measure, in parts, and then wait for Joseph to retranslate or reproduce that translation of the first 116 pages. And if he left it the same, then they could say, "Hey, look, it's different the first time than it is the second time, and he's just making it up." Or if it was different, then they would attack him from the other side. Point being that whatever happened, this would stall the work and its reception at the very beginning, and frustrate the going forward of the Book of Mormon at all to the people that it was intended to go to. Which is why I've always found it interesting that the way the Lord dealt with this entire situation was to hold back the plates of Nephi that Joseph was going to get to translate, that would have a fuller and a more spiritual account of that same story, and thereby avoid the trap that was being laid for Joseph, and take the opportunity to allow young Joseph to learn to lean upon God more than he trusted in what other people said. Any thoughts on that part? Brother Steve?
I think it's kind of interesting that Joseph got reprimanded and Martin Harris didn't. So maybe he's held to a different standard. I don't know. No, I'm not, Terry, I'm not, saying anything about now. But it sounds like, that he was expected to do something that he was commanded, but Martin Harris, maybe, I imagine Joseph talked to Martin after he got reprimanded, so Martin probably got his due also.
Yeah, and it's interesting if you go back and look at Martin Harris's history and experience with the church, with the Book of Mormon, with Joseph, and how that kind of grew and changed over time. I think that's also a good switch to go to Section 5, which is the third of the sections in our lesson, because it's addressed directly to Martin Harris. That describes some of Martin's difficulties and talks about what the Lord wants him to do, and gives him a promise going forward. As I'm sure you all know, if you open the very front of your Book of Mormon, there's the testimony of 3 witnesses that Martin Harris is included in. But at this point in the history of the church and in the work of the church, that was no longer, or not yet, a certain thing. And so Martin had been catching a lot of grief from many members of his family about this whole process of translation and of assisting in what he was doing. And there was a continual request from Martin Harris to be able to show these to somebody, to show that he was actually doing something that was worthwhile and it wasn't all made up. And he made that request often. And the Lord answers in section 5. This is in March of 1829. Behold, I say unto you that as my servant Martin Harris has desired a witness at my hand, that you, my servant Joseph Smith, Jr., have got the plates of which you have testified and borne record that you have received of me. And now, behold, this shall you say unto him. He who spake unto you said unto you, I, the Lord, am God, and have given these things unto you, my servant Joseph Smith, Jr., and have commanded that you should stand as a witness of these things. And I have caused that you should enter into a covenant with me, that you should not show them except to those persons whom I command you, and you have no power over them except I grant it unto you. And you have a gift to translate the plates, and this is the first gift that I bestowed upon you, and I have commanded that you should pretend to no other gift until my purpose is fulfilled in this, for I will grant unto you no other gift until it is finished. And then he goes on to discuss about how the Book of Mormon shall go out unto the rest of the world. And then he talks about, this is in verse 3, about the witnesses that will be ultimately of the Book of Mormon. Behold, verily I say unto you, I have reserved those things which I have entrusted unto you, my servant Joseph, for a wise purpose in me. And it shall be made known unto future generations, but this generation shall have my word through you. And in addition to your testimony, the testimony of 3 of my servants, whom I shall call and ordain, unto whom I will show these things. And they shall go forth with my words that are given through you, yea, and they shall know of a surety that these things are true, for from heaven will I declare it unto them. I will give them power that they may behold and view these things as they are. And to none else will I grant this power, to receive this same testimony among this generation. In this, the beginning of the rising up and the coming forth of my church out of the wilderness, clear as the moon and fair as the sun, and terrible as an army with banners. And the testimony of 3 witnesses will I send forth of my word, and behold, whosoever believeth on my words, them will I visit with the manifestation of my Spirit. And they shall be born of me, even of water and of the Spirit. And you must wait yet a little while, for you are not yet ordained. And their testimony shall go forth unto the condemnation of this generation, if they harden their hearts against them. And the Lord continues to tell Joseph how to relieve some of the current concerns that Martin Harris had about the Book of Mormon, about translating a book and being a scribe for something that he had never seen, and explains again the covenant that follows that book and why he can't see it now. But if he continues in faith in the church, he continues to lift up Joseph, that he will be one of those 3 witnesses that is included in the front of the Book of Mormon. Brother Albert.
I think it's kind of symbolic too. Martin Harris was paying mainly for the expense involved with all this. I think we as a people worry about the same thing. Well, where's the money going to come from? And the Lord rebuked him, about him giving in to the requests of Martin Harris, and he would have provided a way. So money is still that way. It influences a lot of things in the world today, and we know that that's not a good thing. And I find it interesting too. The scriptures I have is an old set of Erling Grasses, and at the section, that was section 5, 5.3d, where it says, "Clear as the moon and fair as the sun and terrible as an army with banners," is a quote from the Song of Solomon, chapter 6, verses 4 and 10. And we find that intermixed in a lot of scriptures, even in the King James and inspired version, something of significance that could be requoted again and applicable to different circumstances. I found that interesting. But yeah, the money. When you asked a little bit ago about, is this about today as well? And we see that. You don't want to burn the bridges behind you if you've got someone that has money that is willing to help, but you cannot attach that money to influence. It has to be done in the way that the prophet receives those things, and to be free of any pressures of Babylon. And that was another thing that occurred to me a while ago, about these things that happen. We all have that tendency to have one foot on the Lord's side and one foot in Babylon. We can't do that if we want the kingdom.
Sister Sherry.
Kind of going along with what Albert said, my mind is kind of stuck on the fact that he was only 23 years old, Joseph. And I think back to how naive I was at that time, not aware of all the intricacies of various people's goals and bad aims, so to speak. I mean, it just amazes me that he could do what he did at that age. Maybe that's my just basing it on how I remember myself being at that age. But yeah, that kind of, when you were talking about the money part, he probably was thinking what Albert was talking about. And because he was young, he trusted Martin. But that's all I learned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always find that interesting, because I feel like when we go back and read in history, we always think of people as older and wiser and knowing way more than we do. And it's always interesting to point out how young and perhaps inexperienced with the ways of the world and of some wicked men people actually were. And I think it lends to and adds to the testimony of the Book of Mormon when you think about that whole process, that this was not somebody sitting down and pulling the wool over people's eyes. This was a young man that was just answering what God told him to. Brother Steve.
I think it's also interesting that Joseph, he first saw the plates when he was 17, and then it was for every year he went back to that spot where they were and met with Moroni. And during those times, he no doubt was instructed of the importance of dealing rightly with these plates, and how the world would want to take possession of him. So he did need to be reprimanded for sure. And I think Martin Harris also must have felt terrible about the whole situation. And he, like you said, had funded or provided a lot of money for this whole project. And I think it's also interesting, while I'm talking here, that all three of those witnesses eventually left the church, and yet they were true to their testimony.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just find it interesting to, as you look through the whole story and read it, to see God planting the seeds for what's going to happen later on down the road, or having already had a plan for it long before that came into being an issue. As you said, that Joseph went year after year and got many instructions about caring for the plates, and about how he was to use them, and about the danger that was surrounding that, of people that were trying to take them, or to stop the work, or to provide some way of putting a stumbling block in his way. And then you think about, many of those conversations were actually for the time that we're talking about. That was done with an eye towards what was going to happen, and this lesson that Joseph was going to learn. And so it was done with an eye of what was going to happen in Joseph's life, but also in Martin Harris's. Martin was a key figure in the early church and in getting many of these things done, as Albert mentioned, that if you go on down the road, Martin's eventually going to be asked to sell his farm to publish the Book of Mormon. And I'm sure that was not a pleasant conversation with his wife. But it came after at that point, Martin had seen the plates and been one of those three witnesses, and it's just interesting to see the way that it's all set up in just the right way, so that everything would work out. Brother Josh.
We've kind of already been touching on little corners of this as everyone's comments and what we've been discussing. But I think it's interesting to step back and take a look at all of these things together, as far as what everyone in the world says about Joseph. I haven't seen anywhere yet where Evans or Fry or Edwards, whoever it was, wrote this book, mention it. But of course, he's preparing this book in a time before the internet. And the rate at which various things have propagated, whether it's related to this or other subjects within the world since the advent of the internet, is startling, to say the least. But with all these various things, ideas that have been brought up, take into consideration what it is we're saying if this is all false. Joseph has managed to dream up all of this. He has dreamt up the entirety of the Book of Mormon, if this is false. He has dreamt up being more chastised for Martin Harris's error than Martin Harris was. Being told to wait, he has somehow managed to pull the wool over the eyes of a man who is being constantly berated by his wife to go and sell his farm so this book can be published. It's like, if someone is going to maintain that this is all false, that probably would make Joseph Smith the greatest con man in human history. And really strains credulity to say that all of this was made up, which in my mind leaves that you can only fall back reasonably to one of two positions. This is either true, or you have to maintain that there was some nefarious otherworldly force that inspired Joseph into this level of deception, because this is not something a 23-year-old man, no matter how shady of a background he may come from, and farming is not an especially shady background, is going to have been able to come up with. It's like, I grew up in the modern day with the internet and movies and TVs and all kinds of different stories to plant seeds of ideas that Joseph wouldn't have had access to. I grew up reading Tom Clancy novels, spycraft, other stuff like that. And at 23, I would not have been able to dream up something as elaborate and successful as this. A man in the early 1800s educated to the modern day third grade level is not going to be capable of this sort of duplicity on his own. So that leaves one of two conclusions. Either it's true or something else had a hand in it.
Yeah. And I think even just more basic than that, the capability of any of us at any age to sit down with a scribe on the other side and just dictate almost 800 pages of the Book of Mormon from start to finish without, stopping and checking or, clearly being reading from something. Like the idea that you could just start the translation and go is something that I don't think any of us could manage today, let alone, as you mentioned, 200 years ago, without any of the assistance that we currently have. Brother Steve.
I had some thoughts, but I didn't have my hand up, and Josh says, "Are you going to say something?" So, oh, I did? Oh, okay. I think it was Martin Harris an apostle when this happened.
No, that's an
Not
interesting
yet.
story, but
What's that?
that's an interesting rest of the story. But
Well, I was going to draw a parallel, and don't throw things at me, but there was a disciple that tried to move Jesus' hand and get him to do what he wanted. Mm-hmm. Of course, Jesus didn't fall for that. Yeah. Of course, Joseph Smith was a man, and we all do think, fall at time to time. But it wasn't the first time that something like that happened.
yeah, absolutely. That is a part of the rest of the story of these three witnesses. They all have a very interesting rest of the story for their involvement in the church. But one of the things that they all came together on was in 1835, yesterday. They organized the Quorum of 12 and the Quorum of 70 for the first time in the Restoration and in the restored church. And the way that they did that was there were three men called and chosen to go to the Lord and to find these apostles and 70 and call them. It was those three witnesses of the Book of Mormon. It was Martin Harris, Oliver Cowdery, and David Whitmer that provided the testimony and were a key part in organizing the entire missionary arm of the church a number of years later. And there's a lot that came and went in all of their lives in their involvement in the church. And to Steve's point from earlier, they all eventually went their own different ways from Joseph. But one of the things that never changed was their testimony and holding to that testimony that's included in the beginning of the Book of Mormon. So even after they left the church, even after they broke with Joseph, when you would think if you were a part of some grand scheme, that would be the time to get rid of it. They never did. That was something that they maintained until their death, even many years and decades after their involvement with the church. So if we flip forward now, as we're running out of time, section 15 is the last of the sections that that are in this lesson and that cover this particular topic. I would point out a couple of things. One is that Joseph inquired of the Lord and received through the Urim and Thummim this message that's in section 15. So there was a comment earlier about some of them coming through the Urim and Thummim. Section 15 is one of those. And it provides direction to the three witnesses that we just discussed and how they should go forward in the work. Behold, I say unto you that you must rely upon my word, which if you do with full purpose of heart, you shall have a view of the plates, and also the breastplate, the sword of Laban, the Urim and Thummim, which were given to the brother of Jared upon the mount when he talked with the Lord face to face, and the miraculous directors which were given to Lehi in the wilderness on the borders of the Red Sea. And it is by your faith that you shall obtain a view of them, even by that faith which was had by the prophets of old. And after that you have obtained faith and have seen them with your eyes, you shall testify of them by the power of God. And this you shall do, that my servant Joseph Smith Jr. may not be destroyed, that I may bring about my righteous purposes unto the children of men in this work. And you shall testify that ye have seen them, even as my servant Joseph Smith Jr. has seen them. For it is by my power that he has seen them, and it is because he had faith. And he has translated the book, even that part which I have commanded him. And as your Lord and your God liveth, it is true. Wherefore you have received the same power and the same faith and the same gift like unto him. And if you do these last commandments of mine, which I have given you, the gates of hell shall not prevail against you, for my grace is sufficient for you, and you shall be lifted up at the last day. And I, Jesus Christ, your Lord and your God, have spoken it unto you, that I might bring about my righteous purposes unto the children of men. Amen. And you can continue to see there the Lord and his plan and all of the different steps by which it was all set in motion. And the calling that he gave not only to Joseph, but to others that were involved to be a part of the work that has allowed the Book of Mormon to come forward, to go into all the world as it has, and to be today given to us to take forward in our part of that same work, so that his purposes would be fulfilled. And if there are no comments, we will pass to our worship service.